Hey there, and welcome to the Recovery Crew on the Deep Waters Recovery Network. I'm Dr. Bob Baer, and today we have Robert White, who is the CEO and founder of Any Lengths Sober Living and Retreat. He's got quite a story, I'll tell you that. He's one of these guys that has really helped more people than you can imagine, but he also burned up the world a little bit on the way there. So he's going to tell some of that story today, and I think anybody, whether you're in recovery or not, or if it's not your deal, I think just the story itself will be engaging. But it's really a story about how to live well. And so Robert White is our guest today. You are on the Recovery Crew podcast with us, and we want you to be part of it. So please reach out, and you can do that through our website, deepwatersrecovery.com. The video version of this is on our YouTube channel, Deep Waters Recovery. You can just search that and you'll find it easily. We're on all the podcast and social media platforms, so please follow and like and share and subscribe, all that good stuff will keep this movement alive. So here we go. Let's have some fun together. Welcome to the Recovery Crew. All right, I think if I look into this screen, I'm seeing a guy named Robert White. Hello, Robert.
Hey, Doc.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get you on here for a while. I snagged him. This is a busy guy, busy saving the world one person at a time, and taking the time to be on here today. We're going to talk about the 8th step, which has a lot of juicy concepts for anybody, not just for us crazy folks that have stumbled in and almost died from the disease of addiction. It's like there's wise stuff for just putting together a plan for living well and being in relationship with other human beings, right? It's very true for all of everything that's in 12-step recovery. We say it's a design for living. Yeah?
Absolutely.
So, 8-step is a juicy doorway to really offload some of the ways that we've created conflict in relationships and to get to know ourselves better so we can bring a more conscious human being to the relationships that we're in. Also today, we're going to have the great opportunity to hear the Robert White story, which, I've heard it a few different times, and it's there's some like tricky twists and turns that got this guy to be one of the best businessmen, as well as one of the guys that knows how to create a space for men to really deeply recover and save so many lives. But I also know that it's because that you need to, for your own sobriety. For my own sobriety, I got to be helping other people in an authentic way, or that's the thing that makes 12-step recovery really different from other programs. Only one alcoholic can help another alcoholic. I mean, and that's how I stay sober, is by helping you. Like there's Robert. If I could possibly help him today, I got a better chance to get through this thing myself.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So Robert White, he's from Odessa. What does anybody here know where where the hell is Odessa? It's out in BFE somewhere, but it's very Texas. I think it's west, right?
West Texas.
Yeah. And he's for some reason I had him send his recent bio, and for some reason there's a whole bunch of shit in there about jet skis. I don't know. He must be you must have turned into a Lake Travis jet ski obsessive sometime. But the main thing is Robert White is the CEO and founder of Any Length Retreats and Sober Living. Here, anybody that's in Texas or the central part of the United States has heard of this thing. It's one of the biggest and best places for men to, a place to go after treatment, also a place to go to get treatment, but mostly they're doing the real deal, the pure version of recovery, not the half-ass version. But we'll get into that more. He's a Longhorn fan. He's a married guy who seems to be able to keep a relationship together. So that's like high-level stuff right there. Oh, yeah. And so glad to have you here, Robert. So I think we'll just start by turning you loose to tell your story, because it's an interesting one, and it's that's the thing that we have, right? When after we get sober, we don't regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. We have our story that other people can relate to, and when you have a juicy story like yours, you got to tell it. All right, so. Anyway, I'm glad you're here, and why don't you just check in and let these folks know who you are and a little bit of your story, brother.
All right, I can do that. I'm really grateful to be here with you. And I used to I was so ashamed about my past, and just maybe obviously some of the stuff that happened to me and the actions that I took during my addiction, but it's mainly the regrets and the things, the people that I let down, not only myself, because everything revolved around me and myself. From an early age, I was an only child, and on my dad's side an only grandchild, so I always say I got double the dose of being spoiled, and I'm really grateful for that, because it helped me be creative, and it also taught me that anything that I was given or that I received, because I did get a lot of attention, all this stuff and all that stuff can't create who I am to be, right? It has to have more depth than that. And hindsight 2020, through getting sober and taking action in recovery and recovering from addiction, it's much more than the relationships. It's much more than the material things that we get in life. It's me being okay with myself, and not only that, but
so Robert, you mean that nice little lace pillow that had Robbie written on it that you could put on the throne? What wasn't enough?
Oh yeah, that was great.
I had one of those too.
All that stuff was amazing, and I don't think it was that. It's from a young age, I discovered that I liked. I thought, when I used to tell my story, I thought that alcohol was the first thing that I ever did. And my experience with alcohol, the first time I drank at I think 10 or 11 years old, I lost control. I drank alcoholically. Me and a buddy, and we were going to share this glass of vodka. We snuck into my dad's liquor cabinet, and we ended up finishing nearly the whole bottle. Of course, we got sick, but it's that. I didn't know it back then. It wasn't every day after that I drank every single day. But I was wow. But through waking up and the longer I stay sober, the more memories that I gain access to from my past, more inventory I do, more, fifth steps that I listen to. It's oh man, I did that too. Mm. And I discovered that around 8 or 9, I was on I think I was 8 or 9, but I was on a family vacation, and we were in Kauai, and it was beautiful there. And I had asthma, and I had an asthma inhaler, and had an asthma attack. And so hit my asthma inhaler and hit it as many times as possible, because I couldn't breathe. And so I got to breathe, but also got this effect produced. I got high off the asthma inhaler, and I was man, I don't know exactly what I thought, but I was I like this. And so that's what I would do with my asthma inhaler, is anytime I used it, I would hit it 5 or 6 more times, get that little buzz from the asthma inhaler. And I was oh damn, I was really screwed from the jump. And alcoholism, alcoholism and addiction is throughout my family tree. My dad's in recovery from alcoholism. He's been sober for a while now. And that's really cool, because that's something else. That was something that when I was really in it, that I would utilize, as a blame, was well, he does it, and so why are you going to get mad at me, Mom? When, Dad does this too, or whatever. It's not really fair, and it's I don't like to be the person that gets, I like a certain kind of attention. you know. I got to control that attention though. You know,
Yeah.
whenever I get like the negative or what I perceive as negative, I don't like that. I don't like to be found out.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
he messed up your whole plan by getting sober.
yeah, he did. He really did. But really grateful that that happened. And there was points whenever I was really struggling um, in my addiction that he allowed me to have my experience, which I didn't see that obviously in those moments, but it was really powerful to look at. Um, I recall like, you know, he wasn't making a big deal of the things that I was doing. Whenever he was allowing me to have my experience, like he'd have talks with me, but he would allow me to have my experience. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity because it allowed me to really start looking at like, okay, do I really have a problem? But you know, from Odessa, Texas, like we had discussed, the whole jet skis and the water sports came about really like in the 90s. My mom and dad started coming up to Lake LBJ. And so that was like, you know, not only like we came up for football games for UT and we'd always go to go to Lubbock. We weren't far from Lubbock to watch whenever Texas was away playing Texas Tech. So like I had this infatuation with like Texas football. And then also like, you know, so Austin, Texas, and then Lake LBJ. It's only like an hour, 40 minutes to an hour away from Austin. So like grew up there doing water sports. Me and my dad would get on our Sea-Doos and we would go all the way up the Colorado River and like really have like cool bonding times. We'd let out like different places, put them on the trailer and just go explore, having a blast doing that. And, you know, throughout school, it's like, you know, made great grades, like A and B student, was very engaged. At a young age, I always forget about this until it pops into my head, but I was diagnosed with ADD in like the first grade. So got put on Ritalin, and I did not like that stuff.
Mm.
Like calmed me down, which I didn't want to be calm.
Yeah.
You
We're
know, it's
not,
like
who wants to calm down? That's like I want to get high.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And so
Yeah.
I was attracted, I think, like, you know, opiates, pot, alcohol, obviously. I mean, I did, you know, my fair share of like uppers, like cocaine, amphetamines. Um, but I really like to like just drown out, you know, and that's what was really attractive to, you know, alcohol, pot, and, you know, opiates, painkillers, and eventually progressing into heroin. Just like I could like zone out and like I didn't have to
Mm.
deal with life, you know.
Yeah.
And throughout, you know, high school, like junior high and high school is like, you know, I would experiment with different substances in high school more so. But I always had like this football element, and like how that came about was in 8th grade. 7th grade, I played like wide receiver and like some defensive, like I can't remember what I played on defense, but I remember playing like slot receiver. And 8th grade comes about, like at the end of the 8th grade, like I injured my left heel. And so like, I had plantar fasciitis, and like I was like, well, I still want to be a part of a team. I also swam like competitively, and then also participated in choir. Um, but my passion, like in my, you know, my buddies and and we're in Odessa, Texas, you know, Friday Night Lights, it's like football, you know, and like that's like, you know, you get that team, the camaraderie, like, you know, it's like just an experience like that I really wanted to have. And so I was like, what position could I play? Like, because I wasn't going to have surgery, like not done growing. So, you know, I was like, well, place kicker, punter. And so I like did some research, or my mom did some research, and like we found this kicking coach, Rocky Willingham out of Dallas, Texas. And like I went and spent some time with him and went to like the football camps at like different universities that he would do for kicking and punting. And went to one in UT, and like, you know, eighth step stuff, right? Like, not trying to lead into that, but I just thought of that. I was like, I got so drunk at one of the kicking camps, and I can't remember how old I was. He'd probably remember. Um, but we got like the staff into some major trouble. Like, we're smoking weed in like the dorms, like we were staying above like, you know, where the athletes stayed or whatever. Obviously, it was the off season, so no one's there, everyone's home or whatever. But I was like, dang, you know, it's like, but that was something, you know, other than drugs and alcohol, it made me feel like, you know, I was invincible. It was like a form of meditation, was place kicking and punting.
Yeah.
So like, I really focused on that. And like, drugs and alcohol like didn't impact my ability to place kick and punt really until my senior year.
Yeah. You only have to have it together for 19 seconds of the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We can pull it together for that. We're high functioning.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, beginning of my senior year, my parents were out of town, and Bud Light Lime had just came out, and I had a friend of mine, older friend of mine, bought me like 3 or 4 cases, or somehow I'd gotten a hold of 3 or 4 cases, and I was like a case and a half through, and I called up a buddy of mine and was going to go meet him out close to Ratliff Stadium, and we were just going to talk about, you know, it's our last year, like, what are we going to do? Like, you know, just chop it up. And like, I never made it to go see my friend that day. Instead, I totaled the car and totaled someone else's. A lady had just bought a Jeep and totaled her car, ran into her. And I was so pissed off because, you know, she pulled out in front of me. You know, I never mind the fact like I was highly intoxicated and got my first DUI. But it was like, it was her fault, you know, in my eyes, right? Because like, you know, I'm underage, I'm drinking, but you know, she wouldn't have pulled out in front of me, then
Right.
you know, I wouldn't have wrecked. And so I got suspended for 3 games my senior year. And I always like to think about this, and I was never able to be honest, like whenever I went to my first treatment center and my first experience with recovery in the 12 steps, because I couldn't see it then as I did later. But like, you know, someone would say like, you know, that would be a sufficient reason, right? Getting suspended for 3 games, a DUI, for me to like at least stop or moderate what I was doing. And that was really my plan, was, you know, for those 3 games that I got suspended, was to really dive deeper into like focusing on my craft, because up to this point I'd been, I'd not been offered any scholarships. It's pretty rare. Maybe nowadays, like, you see more scholarships given away for place kicker and punter. But you know, really, it's like that's a position where you need to walk on and, you know, earn it. But I was getting looked at by Arizona State and Texas A&M, and so all I had to do was apply to school. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to focus. Like, you know, I got honest with my coach. He suspended me for 3 games. And like, this is what I need to do. I need to hunker down and like focus on like school and like becoming a better kicker and punter. But instead, like, I just spiraled out of control. And like, I still, you know, practiced, but I was under the influence. Now I'm going to practice high. Now I'm playing in games high, you know, taking pain pills, smoking pot, drinking alcohol. And, you know, my senior year, still have an opportunity to go play at the next level. And, you know, my mom and dad are kind of fed up with it at this point, because it's starting to really impact, you know, my relationship with them at home. And they say, look, like, you figure it out. Like, you know, if you want to go to school, like, you know how to apply, you know how to do things for yourself, like, figure it out. And I, you know, got some graduation money from grandparents and other relatives. And, you know, I was like, all right, I'm going to save this money. And then the idea was like, no, I'm going to buy a lot of pot and just get high all summer. And I forgot about, you know, applying to college. And instead I went to treatment. And that was like my first experience in treatment, and was met by a really awesome staff. I learned how to surf at this place. It was in California. Like, had a really powerful experience there. Um, but was like, I'm definitely not a drug addict. Like,
Not like those other people.
yeah, like not like those other people there. Never like, I haven't shot heroin, haven't, done some cocaine and some mushrooms and like, other illicit substances,
Yeah.
but like I'm not that bad. I'm like 17,
Right.
18 years old. It's like that's what most of my friends are doing. And so I was like, all right, cool. Now I know what I need to do. I just need to like not get caught. My family doesn't need to find out. So I came back and like kept it under wraps, or what I would consider under wraps. Like my parents would probably disagree with that statement, but from my perspective, went to Odessa College and was going to double down. And me and a buddy were like, all right, let's get the heck out of Odessa. Like Odessa's got to be the problem. At least that's what I thought. I'm going to move to San Angelo, enroll in school there, and walk on. So I got in the best shape of my life. And like the weekend prior to like us going to school, there was a keg party. And a friend there had some benzodiazepine, some Xanax. And so I was like, well, I know what make this party better, a handful of those. And so for the next like 6 to 9 months, instead of going to school, I played Xbox, didn't walk on, played Xbox, did a bunch of cocaine, smoked a bunch of pot, and my mom came and stole my car away from me. That's how I phrased it in my head. It was her vehicle. And so like I'm there and like, she was starting to like, set some boundaries that I didn't like around like, she was trying to not enable me. So she's like, look, like you're not going to school. So like, you don't need a car. And once this lease is up on the apartment, like have fun, good
Right.
luck.
Right. You mentioned it a couple of different times, Robert, and I know there's more to this,
Yeah.
this trajectory of this story, but that your folks let you have your experience. You said that that's one of our catchwords in recovery that everybody listening may not quite know, and not enable you. In other words, we as parents love our kids and we want them to not have pain. But if parents have a little bit of wisdom, they know enough to let them have their pain, because it's the only thing that us addicts understand. It's the only thing that makes us change even a little bit, is when that pain breaks through the self-medicating. I mean, is that what you're pointing at with your folks? They at least had enough wisdom to know they needed to let you have some of your pain?
Yeah, that's what they would allow me to like feel that, allow me to feel like my decisions that I made, like they would allow me to experience some of the consequences. And not really like that was later, but they would follow, like my mom would follow like some of the advice that the treatment professionals would give her.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, she hadn't had her complete amount of pain yet either.
Yeah. And so like that was one of it. Like, and I think, more so, with my dad being a personal injury attorney, right, with like me being messed up, and like I think the amount of cars that I've wrecked or totaled is like, surpasses like 6 or 7 vehicles.
Nice.
Which is like, it's a great thing to be proud of. But it's like, they're like the reasoning on that is like, she didn't want to see me die.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, which is like understandable, because that's definitely where I was headed. Cause I like, one of my favorite things to do when I was messed up was to get in a car and drive around.
Yeah.
Like I never like that was never my intention. Like I knew that was probably not a good idea, but I could not get in the car.
Yeah, it's like any family member that's listening right now that has somebody that's using understands that the deepest paradox we could possibly hold is, I got to let him die, and I will not let him die.
Mm-hmm.
How can I hold that? How can I possibly hold that paradox? It's impossible. The hardest thing any parent could ever stumble into.
Deepening. So, I mean, so I would jump from city to city. And it's just like new people. I went in and out of treatment from 17 to 24. And I think like as my disease progressed, like so did like my family's realization that like I'm gonna die, and like no matter what, like they're not gonna be able to save me.
Yeah.
And so like slowly and slowly, each time I went to treatment, like they would have more kind of like on the table of like, this is what we're willing to do, this is what we're not willing to do.
Yeah.
And like and that became really apparent, like especially whenever I was introduced to heroin. And that was something, like I said, I'll never shoot drugs, like never gonna do that, like because like that'll make me a drug addict, you know.
Yep. That's one of the
And
things that all of us at different times in the progression of our disease. Well, I'm not doing that. That's
yeah, oh yeah,
that's why a lot of times in an AA club you see that sign that says "yet."
yeah, that's yeah. And this was my, I think, third, second, yeah, second treatment center. I went to like a few IOPs and like counselor visits, psychiatrist appointments, like where I would manipulate them to get like certain medications that I knew I could get by saying certain things. Because I was never honest with anyone about what was really going on with me, because I didn't want to know what was really going on with me. I just knew that like how I was doing things like was working because I could, manipulate mom and dad. I knew if I ever got in a jam, I could call them,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. And I just gotten out of my second treatment center. I'd gotten harassment of a peace officer in Denton County. Um, and so I was mandated to go to, well, I wasn't really mandated. It was my choice, but, it was really like to get the courts off my back is the reason that I went to treatment, is because the attorney said, hey, we need to go to treatment. So I went to this really great treatment center, and some seeds were planted about recovery. And I was like, all right, like I might be an alcoholic, but I'm still going to smoke pot. And so I went to this sober living apartment right after this treatment center. It convinced my mom to allow me to keep my apartment in Denton. And so I could drive back and forth because, like, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to walk on and play football. And like that was the story that that kept spinning in my head of like what I'm going to do and how I'm going to accomplish it.
Mm.
This is why. And so, pot like became an option, and because it's not alcohol. And I was like, like I can manage this. I've never had a bad experience with it. And the person I was smoking pot with like seemed to be a little bit more high than I was. And I was like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know, I was pretty irritated because like I wanted to I wanted to feel how he looked. And he was pretty intoxicated. And he was like, all right, please don't be mad at me. I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, I'm using heroin. And I was like, first thought that came into my mind, like, and thing that I said to him wasn't like, oh, that's bad. It was like, how do I use that? And the first thing that he said is like, you do not want to do this. And I was like, how do I use it? I was persistent. Which I think is hilarious, right? It's like anything that like, related to a substance, and like someone's like, yeah, you probably don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, watch.
Exactly.
But, someone sits down with me and they're like, hey, like I can offer you a way of living that will transform your life. And it's these 12 steps, and it's the process we're going to go through in this book. And I got all these questions. I'm like, what about that? Like, do I really have to do this? Like, I'm not making amends to that person. I'm not talking about this. Like, jump all the way around. But, someone's saying, hey, you don't ever want to use heroin. I'm like, yeah, watch, I'm going to do this. Yep. And so I shot heroin the first time I ever used heroin. He showed me how to shoot up, and, it was downhill from there. Like the pain and like the sick relationship like that I had with that substance, was very scary. And I would drive from Denton to Dallas every day or every few days to get, more heroin. And now it's like, okay, like this is costing like way more than the alcohol and the pot. So now I'm having to like come up with stories like to get more money. Like I'm not working. I'm supposed to be in this sober living apartment, but I conveniently got an excuse to leave there, back in my apartment. And it's just like I'm spiraling downhill. And keeping up this, right? And like the first experience that, I knew my family's not dumb, um, but I thought, I was hiding it enough. But it was Super Bowl weekend, and my dad came and visit, and he was sober. And that this was one of the times I was saying, like, he allowed me to have my experience. So we were supposed to hang out like all day Sunday. Drove up from Odessa, and like we were gonna hang out, and like I did a shot the night before, and I didn't like come to until like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And so like I have all these missed phone calls, and like, I'm sure he stopped by and knocked on the door or whatever. And so now I have to come up with an excuse for that. We end up eating and watching the game, but my intentions were like to hang out with my dad. And I was like, man, that's messed up, and but he didn't really like, he didn't give me any shit about that, and he was there for me,
Mm.
uh, which was a powerful experience.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
and that's what I mean. Like he allowed me to like, you know, through his, and I don't know this speculation, but from my own experience, like I start to realize like, well, I'm not going to be able to fix anyone anymore. So like, I'm just going to be supportive in the sense of like, I'll be there for you as a human being, as a father or as a son or whatever. But like, I'm going to allow you to like come up with this realization, and hopefully like you will follow suit by getting help one day.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he knew that I was using, heroin and stuff like that, but that was kind of a pivotal turning point that I didn't, I didn't get sober for years later, but, it's just like that safe space that was held,
Yeah.
without enabling and without like anything like that. It was like, he was showing up as a dad, which was really cool.
That's the hardest balance, to hold space with love and also let a person have their pain. I mean, that's what it takes, practice, because we're from families that, love really well and probably love too much.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, and we have to learn a way to love and also let a person have their pain. I know you gave me the list of schools that you've been to. I thought I had been to a lot of different schools trying to find the solution. Every time my life goes to shit, I go back to school. I don't know if you have that. I think I'm done though. You're younger than I am. You might still use that tool, but and it seems like, if I have the story right, you went to a different rehab in between each school. So you've had a lot of education.
Yeah. One would think, right? I don't know how,
But and here's the point. I was trying to make the point. You had people that hung in there with you, and didn't completely write you off. And you and I know this because we send guys to treatment. We deliver treatment all the time. You never know who's going to make it, or when they're going to make it, or which treatment episode is going to be the one that does it.
yeah.
Let's not write them off. Let's hang in there. But we can't enable either. We have to learn those same skills that your dad learned and provided you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I went to, I think it was like the thing that sent me back to treatment. I went on a family ski trip, and I didn't ski. And like, that was something else, like another part of like where, me and my family bonded, like specifically, my mom and dad and I, was like, I grew up going to Taos, New Mexico and skiing. And we would drive there and like, have a lot of cool experiences. And so like I'm on a family ski trip, and I'm not skiing, and I thought I brought enough heroin with me to, last the trip, and I'm out of it in like a day and a half.
Mm.
And so I'm sick. And so they're like, what the heck's going on? And I knew something was off. I was like, 30, 40 pounds underweight. And so I just kind of like broke down, and got honest about it. And, you know, my intention of getting honest was like, you know, maybe they'll take me to a hospital. Cause I found like a pot dealer, you know, we're in Colorado, like that was pretty easy to find, you know,
Oh
on the
yeah.
ski slopes. Um, but I hadn't found anyone with any heroin yet. And so I was like, man, I'm running out of time. Like, I need to get honest about this, and, you know, I'll get some relief. And so they took me to the hospital. Of course, I looked like a pin pad, or a pin cushion. And like the doctor there, he gave me some stuff to relieve it. But he was like, I'm not giving you much. And he said, like, if you continue to do this, like, I give you about a year and you'll be dead.
Mm.
And I was like, okay. So they put me on a plane back to treatment, from the ski trip straight to treatment. You know, no detours along the way. Um, and this time I was a little bit more convinced. Wasn't fully, but I was like, all right, maybe I'm a heroin addict and an alcoholic. You know, but and like I had gotten past the reservation, my initial reservations around pot and like some other like mushrooms and some other substances. And like I dove into the work and like I experienced some like happiness.
Mm.
Um, And so I was like, all right. And I started like, I went to a sober living there in Kerrville, Texas, and stayed for 90 days, made a 90-day commitment. But there was like these little things, like these little reservations. Like I made a 90-day commitment and I was like stern about that 90-day commitment in sober living. And like the guy in the sober house that was running it and like some of my brothers there were like, hey, you should probably stay a little longer. And I was like, no, I made a 90-day commitment. Like I'm moving into my own apartment, got a girlfriend, stayed around for like 3 months, like was still doing everything, you know, as far as like that I saw, but it was like these little lapses in willingness, and open-mindedness, that eventually, because I stopped diving deeper in recovery, and thought I knew best, I moved to San Antonio. Me and this girl moved in together, and she was going to hair salon school or hair school, and I was working at an air conditioned fabrication shop, and I was going to go to San Antonio College. And so like everything was good. I was in great shape. Like, you know, had 6 months sober, had found a sponsor in San Antonio, and like some inventory came up, and I was like, I'll just put it to the side, and like I was like, all right, I'm good. You know, like I don't need to face that right now. Like I'm sober. Like I don't need to do this recovery deal. Like I can do it on my own. Um, and so like I stayed sober like another month and walked into a hair salon, with my girlfriend. She was going to get her hair done, and they offered us drinks at the door, you know, and I was like, you know, no, I don't drink, not knowing that like, you know, I could probably get a water or something like that or some tea. But, you know, I say, no, I don't drink. I sit down and, you know, I'm reading this magazine, and like this thought comes into my head. It's like, you could have a Dos Equis, you know, like that's not heroin.
No, and it's got kind of a nice sound to it, and
Yeah, it's got a
it's a
really,
little romantic in its rhythm.
yeah,
Isn't that an interesting thing about, you know, all these workshops, and the world tells us, you know, do it on your own, pull up your bootstraps, you can do this. What's the Nike thing? Just do it. You've got
just
this,
do
right?
it.
All
Yeah.
of that stuff is when we hear that from the people we work with, or if we hear it from our story or myself, we know it's a death knell.
Oh yeah.
The exact, and anytime I've got this, I can do this thing on my own. It's like a, it's like a flashing neon sign that I'm on the road to back to the shit, right?
Every time. And so I go back up to the hostess and was like, I would like a Dos Equis. She looks at me weird because I said I don't drink, and you know, but she's not going to turn me away or whatever. And this is the first time I clearly remember not enjoying the drink, because I wasn't experiencing the drink like I had previously. Instead, I recalled that there was a liquor store down the street. And so while I'm drinking this, like I'm planning a way to like, how can I get out of this environment? Like, what can I say to the girlfriend so that I can go to the liquor store and get well?
Yeah.
And there was like no way around it. And so I did that. And she drank too. And I really don't know if it was like, we're in San Antonio, and I don't know if it was like a week later or how long, but I like, my memory comes back and like I'm in front of the dope dealer's house in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
And like I was just in San Antonio. Like, how did I get here? And like now I'm like, she wants to try heroin, and so like, all right, let's go. Like there's no stopping at this point. And so like we ride that wave for like 5 or 6 months. Then we got to get the heck out of San Antonio. And now I'm driving from Austin back and forth from Austin to San Antonio and back, living in her apartment. We're not really together, but we're, using together. It's just kind of like this, sick, insane relationship. And I get pulled over on the way back from San Antonio one night. And at this point, like I'm on 5 years deferred probation from that harassment of a peace officer. And I get a possession of controlled substance.
Let me just interrupt just for a second, because I get these little glimpses of shit. It's like, so look at this guy, Robert White, son of a super parent, highly educated parent, super well-known attorney. I won't go into all that. And just a really smart dude with so much good stuff, right? And shooting up heroin, and gets a little recovery, and he's back on he's like running. And then the point I'm making is the power of this disease. They take you from on the path to getting your life together so many different times, and we're not even done with this story yet.
Yeah.
And then that the power of the disease to just, you got a needle in your arm 2 minutes later.
Yeah.
And Under the Bridge. I don't know if you have Under the Bridge stories, but it's stunning where this disease can take us and how quickly. I mean, I have my own story that the listeners are sick of hearing, so it's good to hear your story. But yeah, man, I mean, it's like all of us. I don't care what part of the world you come from. This disease does not give a shit.
No, it doesn't matter. No discrimination, And that's the beautiful thing about the, power of recovery, power of God, no discrimination. Right. Yeah. And it gets better, never worse. But in order for me to start pursuing that better, like, I had to be convinced of some things, and I was getting more and more convinced. And I remember like that last heroin spree that I went on, like there would be these moments where I would like hear recovery in my head, and like identify and like would agree with what I was thinking, but I didn't know how to stop, and I couldn't stop.
It's like that cliche. There's so many cliches, but they're useful. One of them is AA ruined my drinking, right? It's what we really mean by that is you get a head full of the truth, and it's really hard to completely enjoy putting that counterfeit shit in our bodies anymore, knowing at the same time in my mind, I know I'm killing myself. How it's really becomes more and more difficult to actually get that, to enjoy that high, because we have too much information, and so sometimes it takes a few treatment programs and a few crashes and burns, and fortunately you lived through it. A lot of our brothers and sisters have not made it.
Yeah, very, very true. It takes a lot of people. And so I got arrested for possession of controlled substance, violated deferred probation. So now I'm looking at a minimum of 5 years, plus whatever they're going to try, to give me for, possession of controlled substance. And, I'm sitting in Hayes County Jail, and I know who to call. I'm calling Mom. And she says, all right, but you got to go to detox. And so I was pretty pissed off about that,
Yeah.
because I didn't think I needed that. Like, I just need to get out so I can get high. And so I said, all right, I'll go to detox, but I need a week to get my affairs in order. Like, I don't have any affairs. Like, I don't have a job. I'm not going to school. Like, I don't have any bills to pay. I'm living with this girl. And so I get out and get my car out of the impound, and I head south, back to San Antonio, because like they confiscated all my drugs. And so I get high, make it back. I do that for the next week, and like I'm just pouring it on like as hard as I can. I do not want to live, but like I can't get as high as I used to. And it's just like the most painful part of that was like, the substance that I didn't ever want to stop using is like not working like it used to. So I go into detox, and I walk from detox like 2 days later, get high another week, and check myself into Austin Recovery on November 8, 2010, and lie to them because they said, look, like, if you've been using, like, you got to go to detox. And so I like lied and like kicked cold turkey at Austin Recovery. And that was a painful experience. Wish I would have just went through detox. But this time I was like fully convinced. I'm like embraced like everything that was brought to me. There was like some hesitancy and stuff, right? There were some defying moments of like, stuff I was resistant towards like things that I had questions, but I had more of an open mind. Cause like I had put myself through a lot of pain. And not only that, like people around me, it's like, man, what's going on, and so like, now I'm looking at time in prison, going back and forth to courts with that, going to sober living. One other thing like my family hit me with, was like I'd picked out this sober living house, and it had a pool, it had a gym, and there was no house manager, there was no real rules. Like I think maybe like the first month, it was awesome. I was like, man, this is a place I need to go. And like I sold it to my mom, and she was like, no way. She was like, if you want to go there, like you have your car, you can live in that.
Good for her.
Like, what?
Man, she had been through some training by that point.
Yeah. She was talking to someone else. I didn't like that.
They have, she probably went to a couple of different family programs in the treatment programs.
Oh, yeah.
But there's no training any better than the actual pain of watching yourself bail somebody out and watch them get worse. But behind it, it's how you can't train that. You can't train families around that. They have to have their experience just like we had to have our experience, right?
Yeah. And so I was like, all right, what am I going to do with my life? And so like I went to this like electrician apprentice school, and like started working there while I was in sober living. Did my apprenticeship, like went through that, like sponsoring people. Like first time, like I like went all in recovery, or what I thought was all in at that time. And, plugged in, like, sponsoring people, carrying meetings out to my old treatment center, in a relationship. There was some dishonesty around, some stuff in my relationship that, I didn't want to face, didn't want to really look at. And so like in October 2011, like a couple months prior to that, I went and visited my attorney with my family. He said, look, like this is the best we're going to be able to do, and you're going to have to sign for 30 months in prison. And like I didn't like hearing that, but like it was the first time in life where it was like, all right, these are the consequences of my actions, and like I need to be strong, and not fake it, but like, it is what it is, and like I can stay sober through this. And like it was the first time like where I was able to be of support, first time like a big moment like that where like my parents were like, holy shit, like my son's going to prison.
Yeah, like I'm a little holy shit about the way you responded to that. It's like little Robert with his special little pillow.
Yeah,
Go,
yeah.
going to jail. It sounds like you had enough. It sounds like you had enough. You had had enough pain to realize that. And when we work this program, we have to. And it's a little bit of an intro to the 8-step thing. We have to look at the reality and follow through with whatever shit we've created. We've got to look at it and face it. So, that kind of stuff sometimes is really difficult, though, when you're on the path to recovery and then a guy gets sent to jail. It's not like there's a little bit, the system isn't set up great, but it's also not our job as alcoholics to point at the system as the problem, because we're the problem.
Right. Yeah, self-imposed crisis,
Yeah.
man. Like I couldn't, evade that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was full of, like, I wouldn't say I was full of fear. I had fear about this because, like, I mean, my experience in jail up to this point, maybe the longest I spent was like a day and a half, because I would always get bailed out. And so no amount of like resources, like, that my family could put together. And so not only that, but like, now everybody's going to find out about this.
Yeah.
And that was something like that was really big, that like, 8-step stuff and 9-step stuff, like that I put my family through, because like now, like, what about our reputation? What about like, how did we mess up raising him? Like all the thoughts that like, that families have and like that I've had around like, friends or whatever. And it's like, man, I did that to them. And so like, I get the opportunity to talk to my grandparents about it, finally. And like, I was just like, look, we just got to embrace this. Like, this is who I am. Like, this is what happened, but this is the path that I'm taking now. And like, I'm going to change. And so I went into jail. I went into Denton County Jail in October 2011. Probably the best footing that I'd ever been on in my entire life. And I was pumped up about recovery, and did my best while I was in Denton County. Like, was trying to start meetings in there, was talking to people about recovery, probably overly, like, because I was like, on this high.
Right.
But this is working. Like, and I can't deny, like, all these times, like, I was like, AA is, fraudulent, recovery is a fraud, like 12 steps or BS, whatever. But like, this is the first time, like, I was fully experiencing like the fruits of me taking action. But there's also like, like, okay, if I do this, this happens, right? If I, there's also like the warnings in the big book, right? Like, and most of them have to do with like resentment, dishonesty. Those are like the big things. Like, if I fail to do this, then this will happen too. Like the opposite promises, like the negative promises,
Yeah.
The death threats. And so like I stayed on that, like morning disciplines, like enlarging my spiritual life day in, day out, like doing what I could. And then like I got to this and I was sentenced for 30 months. And I was told like I may be in there for like 10, 15 months max, right? Like I don't have like any aggressive history. Like, the prison system's getting overpopulated. So I caught chain from Denton County, went to Palestine, Texas, at the Gurney unit, and then caught chain to Bonham, Texas at the Choice Moore unit. And then there was a few other transits. And all that during that while, like I stayed dedicated. I persisted. And I got to this pre-parole, pre-release facility in Mineral Wells, Texas. It's a private facility. They've shut down now. And I got there and it was like wide open. It was crazy. Right. And like, that's not like, that's what I want. Like, my ego wants to blame it on that, for my falling short. And I eventually relapsed, right? I fell. And so like this whole time, like Denton County, they allowed you to smoke cigarettes until like they made the law, like where you can't smoke cigarettes in jails. Or at least in that county. And like in TDC, they definitely don't allow you to smoke cigarettes. And so like, through hindsight, through good inventory, I realized like the first dishonest action that I took whenever I got to that pre-parole, pre-release facility is I started smoking cigarettes, which I didn't think is a big deal. It wasn't like, really like disturbing my spirit, but like I placed myself in a position for me to hurt myself once again. Um, and then I was like, man, I'm tired of like bartering and trading like soups and stamps and like whatever else, like commissary that I have for tobacco. Like, how do I get my own tobacco? And so I was like talking to like, cellmates and people in there about how to do that. And they said, look, like you got to get this green dot card. So I was like, well, what's that? And he was like, oh, just call your family and, get them to get a card and like give me the number and I'll get you a pack of tobacco. And so I called my mom. So second lie. And I was like, hey, like I need to do this. Like I'm going to be buying like sneakers and like some other stuff with it. And like there's two forms of commissary. They don't know. Like up to this point, like I've made a demonstration. Like I've been like living by principles. I've been doing like the best I ever had in my life. So why would they question it? So second lie. So I get my own tobacco and now I'm like, selling tobacco in there. And like, now I'm like Mr., not the top dog. Like I don't like ever pretend like I was a horrible, like I tried dealing pot a few times and like, I'm the worst drug dealer. Like I get high on my own supply. So, you're not supposed to do that, I guess. But,
I think that's in the manual somewhere.
yeah. And so I'm sitting in my cell with a bunkmate, and we would share our tobacco so we could stretch it out. And so we're sharing a cigarette he rolled up, and like, boom, I just get this like effect. And I'm like, what? This isn't tobacco, or this isn't just tobacco. And he was like, no, I put some K2, some synthetic marijuana in there, and it's nice. And I was like, dude, I'm like sober. And he was like, yeah, this isn't dope, And I was like, dude, this isn't.
They sell it in head shops. It's not dope.
Yeah, it's good. And so like I had this thought like, hey, you need to call someone now, or you need to go talk to someone now, and like set this straight, because like you did like you put yourself in this position, but you weren't seeking to get high. And like instead of doing that, I was like, no, I'll just like I'm gonna lay here. I'm gonna think about some stuff. And like, and then another thought came in. It was a great idea, I thought at the time. It's like, hey, it's not heroin. It's not alcohol. And like, as long as you mix K2 with tobacco, like it'll be good. Like the whiskey and milk,
Whiskey and milk.
K2 and tobacco. And so that's what I did. And like, but at the same time, so I would like during this time, like I was in communication with my sponsor. I would call him every chance that I got. I would, write back and forth with like brothers and sisters in recovery. Had to like, man, like talk about like real friends. Like I found some like real friends in recovery. The amount of support and love that I got while I was incarcerated was like, I never thought would be possible. But now I have to keep up this lie. And I was like, all right, I got to keep this up. Like no one can know about this. Like this is going to be my secret. I don't think it's a relapse because like my cellmate, like he tricked me into getting high. So it's his fault. Like he's the scapegoat, And so I kept this on. And eventually like I stopped, mixing it with tobacco because like, why am I going to do that? I'm just going to smoke straight K2. And it was like 3 months of this, just like, and I went from like being free in prison to completely, like literally, like not only physically locked up, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally just trapped.
Wow.
And now I'm having to like during visitations, families coming to visit me, people are coming to visit me. I have to keep up this, like this double front.
Right.
Horrible. And so like it's getting closer, and I get notified like 2 weeks before I'm discharged, like going to get released. And I got released on April 28th, 2012, which that's my recovery date now, my sobriety date. I get notified like, hey, you're about to get out. You're going to get out in like a couple weeks. And so I'm like, man, what am I going to do now? I thought I would have some time to like, maybe shake it off or whatever. Instead, like I just dive deeper. Like I can't stop. And I start drinking some hooch in there, and like now it's just like a real shit show. Of course, continuing to lie. And I don't think anything of it like that. Like I'm able to like because they're only sitting like they only interact with me with maybe an hour once a month. And so like 2 days before I get released, like I have this thought and I'm like, AA recovery, like all this stuff is just, a lie.
I love that. I love this because you and I, can you hear me right now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that there's these little moments throughout your whole story. You're a pretty smart guy. I'm a pretty smart guy, pretty creative, all that. But it's not that much of an advantage to be smart in recovery. And we find that I've noticed several times along your story, you said, I had this thought.
Yeah.
Every one of them takes you down. And that's why in recovery, we learn to like check our thoughts out with other people. We need a lot of adult supervision to make it through this life, right?
Oh yeah. Up here is a horrible place to be just with me, That's why it's like I gotta be in the action business. That's it.
But I think this story right now is about to turn to the final treatment episode, and then the launching into this. You're helping a lot of people. I think.
Yeah.
Are we right at that curve in the road?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Is that what it is? Because I'm going to tell you what. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to suggest that we, I think it's a thing that they do in episodes on different. I'm a Netflix binger. I think they leave you with a hook, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This horrific the story of Robert White, the good little boy, a punter who turns into this ridiculous criminal, heroin addict,
Yeah.
and. But anybody that knows what he's up to these days, that was the soil. That was the soil. I haven't really heard your whole story like this before, but I bet people listening to this can say, "Wow, we all have our doorway into your story." We all have our. Yep, me too. I've had several of those listening to you, Robert. But I think what I'd like to do is our next episode is going to be the Robert White story part 2 with the punchline to all of this. And then we'll go into the 8th step in that episode.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think let's do that. And I think let's call this somewhat of a wrap unless there's something you want. At the end of this, though, and we are at the end of this episode of the Recovery Crew. I do want you to go ahead and say how people can reach out to you, and also knowing that we're going to have another episode of you next week that they'll be able to tap in there. But say just a little bit about Any Length, Sober Living, and Retreat, and how to get a hold of you, will you?
Yeah. So Any Length Retreat, we're a 15-bed facility in Pflugerville, Texas. It's a men's recovery center. And our whole thing is showing men how to live life sober and learn how to recover for life through the application of the 12 steps. And a way to get a hold of me on Facebook, you can reach out to me on Facebook. But if you're really looking to learn more information about Any Length Retreat, you can contact us at 866-433-1992 and just give us a call. And you can always ask to speak to myself or just reach out on Facebook. Anything that we could do to help out, we love helping out. And we love showing men that, you can have fun in recovery, but I've got to develop this foundation in recovery to really enjoy, the fruits of my life. So,
yeah, yes, and we, of course, when anybody that connects with Deep Waters you'll be on the website very soon, and we'll backlink each other so that we're
cool.
more connected. Certainly, you can reach out to us, and we'll connect you to Robert and Any Length. I do want to read. Anybody that's been in 12-step recovery very long has heard this quote, but I want to read it just because. It's so congruent with the name of your organization and your story, and and just kind of the essence of who you are. So this is from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. So thank you for taking those steps, Robert. And thanks for being present and still, because you could be doing a million other things in this world. And you're making a choice to be there and be still enough for other men who are struggling, that need to find somebody solid enough that they can be the wacko selves that they are. We all needed that when we came in, right? We needed somebody that was solid and still enough to be able to deal with my chaos until I could calm down and maybe hear a deeper rhythm for my life. So thanks for being that guy. And I am excited about the next episode. We're going to talk about the 8th step, which has so much for just living a good life and how to have good relationships. It's not just about saying, I'm sorry, I did all that shit. All right. No, we'll have a good conversation about that. So thank you everyone for listening. We will have Robert back here next week on the next episode. But you are on the Recovery Crew podcast. This podcast is on our YouTube channel, which is the Deep Waters Network. You can find it easily there. We're also on all the social media platforms and on all of the podcast platforms, or most of them. So it's not hard to find. Please go like, share. Apparently the being an Instagram follower is an important thing, I'm told. So that and subscribing to the podcast. If you guys could do that, it'd be great for this movement. We're pushing this movement forward of letting go of dependency, healing trauma, and launching into lives of meaning. That's what we're up to here at Deep Waters. And who better to have on the show than Robert White? So make sure you come back for our next episode. You're in the Deep Waters now.